Call the City of Canby Planning Commission meeting to order. This is Monday, July 14th, 2014. It's 7 o'clock. Present, we have Commissioner John Surlett, Commissioner Sean Hensley, Commissioner Larry Boatwright, and I am Commissioner John Savory. We do have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. Do we have any citizen input on non-agenda items? And since we have no citizens except for Mr. Ryder out there, then there will be no citizen input on non-agenda items. Minutes from the last meeting of June 9th. Has everybody had an opportunity to read those? Any additions, subtractions, changes to those minutes?
No, sir.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes, commission minutes of June 9th.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes for June 9th, 2014.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Boatwright seconds that. All in favor of approving the planning commission minutes of June 9th, 2014, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It was unanimous. For planning commission minutes for June 23rd, 2014, everybody had a chance to review those as well. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Chair, I move that we approve the minutes for June 23rd, 2014.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Boatwright seconds that. All in favor of approving the planning commission minutes from June 23rd, 2014, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are now in the book. There are no public hearings this evening. Final decisions on the Eli Estates subdivision. No public testimony this evening. These are final written versions of previous oral decisions. So we will move to any discussion on that. Okay. Brian, then I guess we just approve. Would that be correct?
Yeah, you make a motion to approve these, and then I have for later tonight, you
Okay.
could actually sign this for the chair.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve subdivision 14-03, the Eli Estates subdivision.
Chair, I move we approve sub 14-3, Eli Estates subdivision.
The findings.
The findings.
Excuse me,
The written
findings.
findings.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Mr. Boatwright seconds that. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. There is no new business on the agenda unless somebody would like to add some this particular time. Okay. No new business. Old business. Continued from the June 23rd, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. The applicant is requesting a minor modification for the sidewalk location along Northwest 10th Avenue. That would be mod 14-01. Has everybody had a chance to review that, the modification? Is there any thoughts or discussion on that? Brian, you look pensive and ready to comment.
Really, I'd be happy to throw out a few comments just to help.
Okay.
My understanding was at the previous meeting, Chair Smith requested a postponement so that we could be absolutely sure he fully understood if there were any relevant information that was in the previous Phase 2 Northwood subdivision approval. And so that's basically what we did is provide you not only his application and narrative requesting and explaining why he wants to change the sidewalk position, but to give you all the discussion that went into approval of the subdivision and its findings and the staff report and some possible maps and things. And I was just kind of glancing through some of those, and about all that I see is a couple statements, one statement in the minutes that asked for 12th Avenue, that the planter strip that was shown on the original master concept plan, that the sidewalk location be changed for that one while the subdivision was being approved. But there was never any request specifically at that time dealing with 10th Avenue. And then the construction plans after that subdivision was approved, they clearly showed a planter strip along 10th Avenue as well. And so that's why we're really here, is because of the Planning Commission had approved that subdivision with the sidewalk with a planter strip, and we thought it was most appropriate that the Planning Commission make a change, since they're the ones that approved it that way to begin with. And his letter explains all the reasons why he would choose to have it relocated. And then on the other side of the question, the only few things that I could tell you is why we have planter strips, if you're not 100% sure, is our transportation system plan has the street cross sections in it. And 10th Avenue is actually classified as a neighborhood route, which is one step above the standard local street that you see in the rest of Northwood's development. It's not to the degree that it's a collector street, but it's in between the two. And that cross section shows that we can approve anywhere from a 0 to an 8-foot wide planter strip. And so it gives the flexibility to staff and/or the Planning Commission to make a decision whether there is one or there isn't one. And even when we agree that there's planter strips, or at times when we agree there's not going to be one, there are shifts in sidewalks during construction because of details that you just don't know, even with construction plans, until you're out in the field building them. They could be underground obstacles that they need to avoid or whatever. And so there are always some slight variations, such as overhead electric poles. And we have that in this particular case on the north side of 10th. There's a whole row of these power poles and overhead lines that there was consideration of burying them, but it was too expensive, and so it was approved without burying those. So the applicant, if he gets his curb-tight sidewalks, is proposing to deflect around the poles so that you still have a full width of the sidewalk that will be built. So even at that, some small portion won't be curb-tight because it's going to deflect around the pole. That's actually could be an argument for having a planter strip, however, because we do want to keep the poles out of the sidewalk, and it looks like they'd actually fall on the north side within a planter strip. But there's those kind of issues that are involved in this, and as he's pointed out, there's a whole litany of advantages for the developer. And it's kind of interesting, I was attending last week a Traffic Safety Commission meeting, and they were talking about various things in 10th Avenue and Northwoods. I happened to mention that the sidewalk issue was before you for tonight. So the Traffic Safety Commission there's our commission as well. They started discussing the issue and trying to decide if they were for or against planter strips. And there was quite a divergent view on that board, which has a lot of citizens, members and such. People see them as maintenance problems. In this particular case, I think you're aware that the original reason they were proposed is for drainage trenches or swales. to handle the street runoff in those adjacent swells. They've since abandoned that solution to drainage when the subdivision was approved and agreed that they were going to use the typical Canby underground injection wells, and that they were able to do that. They were also talking about doing permeable paving, and that got changed at the last minute. They were worried about it being ruined during the construction of the houses or something. I'm not sure what all the reasons were, but they didn't really need it, so they chose not to do the permeable paving as well. That is another solution for drainage. So the primary reasons for these planter strips have gone away, other than their separation from a sidewalk. It makes pedestrian environment a little friendlier when you're not right against a street. That's one of the reasons that we have planter strips. The other, probably biggest reason for them is they serve as a place to plant street trees. And there is a condition of approval with Northwoods that talked about the applicant would be required to put in street trees along 10th Avenue and the other areas of the, and so just because you have a curb-tight sidewalk in the rest of the subdivision doesn't mean there aren't going to be street trees, but what it does mean is that those street trees will be placed in a tree easement on private property, not within the public right-of-way. When you have a planter strip, then the street trees actually go in the public right-of-way, and so they're, quote, real street trees. Whereas we put them in an easement on private property to help us realize that they are still street trees required by the developer, and that the property owner shouldn't just cut them down without requesting permission.
So, let me see if I've got this clear in my head. So if it's a tree easement, that becomes, and that is put on private property. Is that correct?
That's right. We don't need tree easements if the trees are going in the public right-of-way.
Okay. But on these planting strips that, or this particular planting strip,
They would be in the public right-of-way.
okay.
And the city maintains those, is that correct?
No, we don't, unless they're serving drainage purposes. Then we do.
So if the city has an
Potentially.
easement,
Well,
the tree is in the city easement,
they're
why is
not,
it the homeowner responsible?
for the same reason that the homeowner in every residential subdivision maintains up to the street curb. And so the city doesn't go around mowing your front yard, even though the first 11 or 12 feet of everybody's yard is city right-of-way. Just because it's city property doesn't mean the city's maintaining it. We have ordinances that are adopted that says, you shall shovel the snow on the sidewalk, which is not on your property, but in the public right-of-way. So it's the same concept.
Is it not less intrusive to put a tree in somebody's yard than to move the sidewalk 6 feet back into somebody's yard? If you're gonna have an easement, you're gonna have an easement either way. I mean, you're just giving them another piece of grass they have to mow. Why not leave the same piece of grass and put the sidewalk out front? Then they're gonna put a tree in the yard, that's less intrusive to me.
Seems like it would be.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to, now we're gonna move it back and give them 2 pieces to mow, and oh, by the way, that's still you have to take care of that tree,
Right.
no matter where it is. I'm just looking at this as continuity, especially with 10th Avenue, because we're patching it in. You know, it's now, if we go and we put planter strips in this, it's gonna look totally different than every other piece of 10th Avenue.
As I understand, there's no planter strip on the rest of 10th Avenue.
That is correct. And so which, the city's been working for several years to try to acquire easements on private property in both directions from Northwoods on 10th, so that the city can do one big project to put in sidewalks on both sides of the street, all the way down to the fairgrounds. because there's very little sidewalk that exists. And what does exist, very little, is curb tight. And if you can imagine, if we were to ever put a sidewalk along that street, it's going to be curb tight because half the people don't want one.
Right.
Because it's, after you're already there and have existed for 30 or 40 years, you don't want that intrusion, which will appear to be in the middle of your yard if you set it back. And so, yes, you're 100% right. It would match what we're hoping a project to do in the future. That doesn't mean we can't taper a new subdivision that sets the standard and then taper to the curb tights. That is possible to do that. And that's what was originally planned on the construction drawings. But I think as they were looking, another issue, I'm not sure if he mentioned it in his letter, along the St. Patrick's Church property, which is a pretty good distance, there's a slope issue. And so if the sidewalk, if a planter strip is used there, then the sidewalk will be right on the property line, and there will have to be a retaining wall built along the church's property. That will be a little bit more expensive for the developer to have to do that, to adjust because of the grade difference. With the curb-tight sidewalk, he can actually slope the ground from the church property down to the edge of the sidewalk. So there's a lot of reasons that he's made the request.
Okay.
I have a question on, I think it's in the old business section, I just think that's what we're dealing with. On page 29, there is attachment C. And what my question is this area right here, since we don't have an old bit to look at,
The intersection.
the intersection of 10th right there.
Is that Grant right there?
And it's 10th and,
Oh, 10th and Elm, that's what.
yeah.
I think Grant didn't sound right.
My question is are we going to have turning issues the way the street is bottlenecked down right in here for large UPS trucks, fire trucks, et
No,
cetera?
they've looked at all of that, and everyone is satisfied, all the engineers that are involved, that that's not an issue. And the sidewalk issue.
Is this a swale right here, or what exactly
Well,
is that on the south side?
See this little green strip going right along here?
Mhm.
Those are the planter strips shown here. This was approved in 2001, and this was a planter strip here as well.
You're talking
All
about
these
right
others,
here,
you can
right?
see the
Yeah,
curb
so
type
this, see
is
how
the planter
this bump out is right there?
So
And
these
that's the
streets on
planter
the
strip and then the
side
sidewalk setback.
planned, including this, with planter strips. But they did not do these
So there.
planter strips
Okay.
with Phase 1. He wanted to change this when everybody approved that at the time of the subdivision. He just didn't ask down here because he still thought he was going to have to do them to satisfy the street runoff. So, that was the original concept, was to have the planter strip as it's shown along both sides here, all the way.
And this is where we're talking about the retaining wall on St. Patrick's?
Yeah, it would be along this section right
What
here.
what are you talking about, John?
I'll show you.
Lot 59 there.
This is the area in question right here
Right.
in St. Patrick's property.
And this is where they want to put the,
The retaining wall, depending on which way the curbs go.
right.
Okay, very good, press on.
Thank you. Sean, you had a comment?
No, I'm good.
Any more, Brian, did you have any more that you wanted to add to
Nope.
that? Okay. Any more comment? Somebody would like to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we approve subdivision file sub 13-01 as written.
Do we have a second to that?
Is that with curb type?
Yes.
I second.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve modification 14-01, sidewalk along Northwest 10th. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved unanimously. Items of interest from, well, that would be you, Brian.
We don't currently have any applications that are on the next regularly scheduled meeting on July 28th. However, we are working on a minor partition and another subdivision called the Beck subdivision for the August 11th Planning Commission meeting. So you can anticipate those coming up. So currently, we could potentially put on a discussion about the tree ordinance, if you'd like, for the July 28th meeting. Otherwise, I doubt that staff's going to have time to get anything else prepared for that meeting. So we need to think about possibility of either canceling it or talking about the tree ordinance. And the reason we were going to talk about the tree ordinance was really a focused one, in that we're either going to require trees or we're not going to require trees along arterial streets. But that's not truly much of an ordinance discussion, and I can explain that once we have that. It's a matter of not having the available right-of-way on arterial streets, whereas on subdivisions internally, we make them do and give us the right-of-way we need. We can't necessarily do that on arterial streets, because they're already built out, except for that little subdivision, so you're not going to widen part of the street just because that's the only area left to develop. It doesn't have any practicality. So, I mean, that's a pretty simple answer to what I believe is Chairman Smith's concern, that we weren't being consistent in requiring street trees, but that consistency was only on arterial streets, that we were lacking thereof. So I don't know if that's worth a whole meeting to discuss that, since I just discussed it now.
In summary, Commissioner Sirlin, any thoughts on our July 28th meeting?
Well, from what I heard, I don't see where we need to call that meeting based on what we have right now. I think the tree ordinance could be incorporated into the following meeting. I don't see a big time bite taken out of that following on meeting that to require just a very short one on the 28th.
I wouldn't be disappointed with that. I'm going to be on vacation, so I wouldn't have to read while I'm on vacation.
The dog ate his homework, no doubt.
I won't be here the 28th. then.
Oh, wow.
So Larry doesn't
Okay.
really care.
We will not be having apparently a planning
I think
commission.
you guys should have it.
Well, that'll be Commissioner Sirlin, myself, and maybe Tyler Smith, Commissioner Smith, so I guess we can go
Okay,
ahead.
that's great. That'll help staff out a lot to know what to plan for. And Laney is on a trip to Chicago this week, all week long, and she's representing the union on a national level. And then it's very possible that this Friday, I'm hoping that Angie will be still working with us here Wednesday, because we have some items, annexation items on the council agenda, and she's going to help me with that. But she's about ready to have her baby. So
Well-
she'll be taking some time off here soon.
Well, I'm thinking she could have it here, add to the excitement for the people on TV. Commissioner Hensley has some experience in delivering babies, I think.
Just C-section, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, there you go. I'll lend you my Swiss Army knife.
There we go.
So we will not have a meeting on the 28th.
That's really all I had.
Okay. Any items of interest or guidance from,
I do have a question. In regard to 10th Avenue, since we're developing that area down there around the St. Patrick's area, Is there anything that you know of forthcoming of reworking 10th, either east or west from there with sidewalks and curbs and well, there's curbs already, but I guess it'd be sidewalks,
Yeah.
such as we did on North Juniper and 5th this year.
There's been
That will kind of tie it to the...
efforts to utilize a community development block grant funding, but that was from approximately Ivy or maybe a little further east, Locust, eastward, because you have to have a defined area of low to moderate income to use those community development block grant funds. But we have been thwarted for year after year after year in getting the grant funding for that project because we didn't have all the easements secured. And we're still in that bind right now. There has been an inordinate amount of time and effort on the part of our city engineers firm, various public works staff and planning staff. Matilda's been working for several years on trying to secure 5-foot wide sidewalk easement on all of the properties. There's still properties holding out that haven't dedicated those, and without those, we can't get the grant funding. And the project, even if the city was to pay for it all ourselves, we can't implement it, or it's not going to make a lot of sense to have these gaps, go for 4 lots, and then there's a gap, and then 3 more
Right.
lots that are okay.
Well, that's my question, is since we're doing the part there by, of this development, is, you know, if we could tie that to getting the rest of 10th done, because there is a lot of traffic down there and a lot of pedestrian traffic too.
So, I mean, what that means is it's been a very, very high priority project for the city, but until we get enough backing at whatever level we need to understand that you're never going to have 100% participation from people, and at some point, you may have to force an easement on someone to get a project done that's of such good community benefit. So, until we get that at the highest levels, that they really want that project completed for the community, we may be thwarted by 1 or 2 people.
More thoughts? Okay, thank you, Brian. Thank you, audience. Well, that would be you, Ken. Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn, sir.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Oh, you should run.